KMOX. Now, back to Nothing Impossible. Sponsored by Accelerate St. Louis, the epicenter of innovation for the St. Louis region. On News Radio 1120, KMOX.
All right, well, we have talked about the soccer stadium effort in St. Louis and how it failed this past Tuesday. And there's a lot of, you look at social media, there's some people with a lot of desperation kind of statements out there. But what really is the future of the St. Louis region? Is it as pessimistic as some people might say?
Is it as dire as some people might say? Is it as divided as some people might say? Is it as sad? No, I don't think it is. I don't think it is. Maybe the proposition didn't pass. Okay, you know what? Put on our adult pants and get back to work.
Let's figure out what else is going on in St. Louis, because sometimes after a setback, you need a reminder of where you are and what you have already accomplished. And so I talked with the former president of the then RCGA, now known as the Regional Chamber, Dick Fleming, about what's going on in St. Louis in terms of economic development and also some of the things that he's seen in other cities over the course of his long career, some of the things they've done to improve. And so here is Dick Fleming, interview recorded at the Cortex Innovation District. What is the reason to be optimistic about the St. Louis region?
I think there are many reasons, and understandably, the folks that were advancing the cause for soccer, it was a disappointment. But I'm a glass half full guy, having done this kind of economic development work most of my career in Atlanta and Denver, and we were flat on our back in Denver and came back and look at Denver today. I see St. Louis as a place of extraordinary unfulfilled opportunity, and there are a number of things that are actually happening now that if we can connect the dots and leverage them with one another, the success of Cortex, the fact that the city was successful in landing a $1.75 billion anchor at Northside Regeneration in the new NGA headquarters, and what Northside is about to become, the first new market rate housing in North City in probably 5 generations, and the new development that is happening at Pruitt-Igoe in terms of a HealthWorks village in an area that has not had good medical services, and an innovation district now being planned across the street from the new NGA headquarters. And you look at what Cortex has spawned around Cortex. I have my office here at Cortex. It's remarkable. I serve on a national board on placemaking and innovation districts for the Brookings Institute, and they're looking at St. Louis as a best practices example. So we ought to start believing in ourselves and building off of the momentum that has already been created, both here at Cortex, what's in the works at Northside. Downtown is getting its second wind in terms of what T-Rex is doing and what the Globe Building is doing. And there's a whole technology base there that Gabe Lozano and his colleagues at Locker Dome are envisioning 1,000 tech firms in downtown by 2020. We made a strong case to the NGA and to the federal government that what has happened at Cortex is going to happen in the rest of our center city at Northside. And Grand Center is becoming more than just a great place for entertainment. They're recruiting companies. They recruited an international company there for their headquarters, and they're building housing there. We need to put a fresh start on some of the things that have gone down a bit in downtown. We need to get the housing going again in downtown. I see these as all opportunities, and even on the sports front, we were very, very disappointed some years ago when we got the funding, the public-private funding for the new Busch Stadium through the Senate, and the speaker at the time wouldn't bring it up in the House, and everybody said, "Oh my God, the Cardinals are not going to have." Well, we got a nice ballpark there because Plan B was developed, and I don't know if that can happen with soccer or not. I'm certainly not an expert, and it's obviously going to be up to the folks that are pursuing that. But in the larger equation, we have so much opportunity, as our new mayor, about to be new mayor, Lyda Cruson, said on election night. We need to set our sights high, whether it be dealing with the problems that we clearly have or seizing the opportunities we have. And what we're talking about here are opportunities.
You mentioned unfulfilled promise. And, the thing I've heard, the phrase I've heard multiple times in the last few days has been, in St. Louis gets in its own way again. St. Louis continually gets in its own way. Is that something that you agree with that sentiment, or what's behind this unfulfilled promise?
Well, attitude certainly does have something to do with it. As I said, I've done and led economic development in Atlanta and Denver before I was recruited here to St. Louis to head the chamber from '94 to 2012, and we sometimes do get in our own way. And I think I'd put it in a more proactive way and say we need to start thinking of the opportunities on the upside. In Denver and in Atlanta, the competition is fierce, but when it's not a zero-sum mentality. It's not a mentality that when one player wins, everyone else loses. And at times, I think we get into that routine here, that we have a scarcity mentality at times, and we ought to have an opportunity mentality, and we ought to, celebrate when someone wins, even if the others are competing with them. As I said, in Denver, when a developer wins a very aggressively competed deal, they pat them on the back and they said, the pie has grown and everybody gets a bigger share. And that's, I think, what we need to aspire to in St. Louis.
And so is that attributed, do you think, to the city-county split and the 90 municipalities, all of these mayors competing against each other, even just to lure the Walmart from up the street? Or do you think that St. Louis can move forward without some wholesale reorganization of our governments?
Well, having seen what's happened in places like Indianapolis, I certainly think that is an ideal ultimately, but that is not an excuse for what we're talking about here. I think we can do what we're talking about of having an opportunity mentality apart from how the city and the county are structured. I think it would be great to rationalize that relationship and to make it more workable from a governmental standpoint. But the attributes that we have and the assets that we have can be leveraged and enhanced apart from the governmental structure.
Are we doing that enough?
I think we're beginning to do it. I think certainly what we've seen here in the 15 years of Cortex, which was, it was a completely fresh start that grew out of a new aspiration that Bill Danforth and the RCGA and the institutions, the universities said, we've got a future in an area that we never even thought of as an industry called plant life sciences. And look what's happened, with the Danforth Center, with what has happened here at Cortex, what's happening now in Creve Coeur with the whole ag tech district there. We need to build on that and do more of it.
St. Louis has had the success at Danforth, here at Cortex with T-Rex, but what about sustaining those? Unfulfilled promise. Is there a chance that we don't connect all of these together, or something happens, we don't fund arch grants and it fades away into the future? I mean, that seems like it's a St. Louis kind of a getting in its own way thing where we might have a great success, but then we don't sustain it.
Well, I think there's every reason to expect that we should sustain it. Shame on us if we don't. And there's enough proof in the return on investment from what's already happened and what's now about to happen in the completion of Cortex, with what's about to happen with Northside Regeneration and NGA, that we again, it gets back to my point. I see the glass as half full, and fulfilling the rest of that glass is a function of people putting their shoulder to the wheel. And I was inspired with the opportunity that the incoming mayor talked about on Tuesday night. I mean, she was very candid. She said, "We got problems. We got to deal with this crime issue. We got to deal with the crime, the literal crime that's happening, and the perceived concern about safety. But we also have something of a momentum now with the technology and the kind of decision that NGA made, with the success that Cortex has made, and we need to build off of that. And I think that we need to keep reminding ourselves we're in a competitive environment. For all the good things that have happened at Cortex and that are about to happen in downtown and at Northside, there was a ranking that came out the other week, and Charlotte was rated the best tech city in America, and we were something like 40-something. and Kansas City was up in the top 20. And I think we need to learn from that. And I know, we still blame them for 1985 in the World Series, but I think we can learn something.
Why is Austin, viewed the way it is, or why is Portland looked at as this, cool, hip, growing place? What happened in Denver?
Well, yeah, and Denver has both a history of being pretty venturesome in this respect. The founding of the chamber in Denver back in the 1800s, and I had the pleasure of serving as their CEO in the late 80s and the early 90s, was that the railroads decided to bypass the Transcontinental Railroad, went to Wyoming to Cheyenne instead of Denver, and the next morning the business leadership went out and started raising private money, and they put a bond issue on the ballot, and they financed building the connection to the Transcontinental Railroad from Denver. It otherwise probably would have been a dust town or a ghost town. And when we went through the energy collapse in the mid and late 80s in Denver, it was pretty devastating. We went from a situation where we were adding 5,000 people a month to Denver, everyone showing up getting a job. We had 1,000 energy companies based in downtown, from 2-person operations to 2,500-person operations of the big companies. And overnight, in 1 year, we lost 118,000 jobs when the energy economy collapsed. And the community, both the public sector and the private sector, we elected a new mayor in Federico Pena, by the way, who ran on a campaign, Imagine a Great City, in the middle of this. And the community, the public and private sector community, put their shoulders to the wheel and seized the opportunity. We said we can cry in our beer over what just happened, or we can seize it and deal with it. And we seized it and we dealt with it. We built a new airport to solve a problem. We redid our downtown. We created a regional funding system for the arts. We recruited Major League Baseball. We settled a 7-year site selection battle between warring billionaires on where the convention center should go. And the result today is, there was just an article last week in one of the London papers of the headline of which is Denver, the coolest city today in the United States. Well, that didn't just happen. It happened because of taking a set of opportunities and challenges and believing in the place. And I think we have many of those same opportunities. We're not nearly as down and out as Denver was in, say, 1990. And we have many more assets that Denver would die for in terms of our cultural institutions, and they would kill for a Washington University, although Emory would say that they're pretty good. We simply need to step back from this and say, how do we make the most of it in the competitive economy we're in globally and nationally? And I think we're beginning to see that happen.
That's Dick Fleming. Thank you for joining us this week on another episode of Nothing Impossible.
We'll see you next week.